Okay, so you're very welcome to the PPI Contributor panel here in the main room, and we entitled this My Voice Shaping Research. So we have 5 excellent panel members who have a lot of experience of PPI, and we're looking forward to hearing their perspectives across the next hour. My name is Dr. Ruth McMenamin. I'm co-lead for PPI Ignite at NUI Galway, along with Martin, that you met this morning in the first session, and I'm facilitating this session with my colleague Wendy Costello. So what we might do is, just to get started, a quick introduction of the panel members. So I'll invite the panel members and Wendy to introduce themselves and maybe just say how they got into PPI research. We'll hear more about their work in PPI over the next hour. If people have questions for the panel members, like in the first session, can you pop them in the chat, and we'll do our very best to get to all of your questions before we finish at 11:45. Thanks to everyone. So Wendy, I'll go to you first to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And it's really great to be back again this year. This session was so successful last year that there was no doubt in our mind when we were organising it that we had to have it. So my name is Wendy Costello, and I am involved in a children's charity called ICAN, the Irish Children's Arthritis Network. And I helped set this up quite a few number of years ago because my daughter has juvenile arthritis. I've been involved in a lot of research projects as a PPI co-lead, and also as getting people involved and running workshops. It's been a real passion of mine for the last couple of years. So hearing Jennifer speak this morning really did resonate with me, and I'm delighted that one of the young people that I have been involved with in the last couple of years, Caoimhe, has joined us. So I think that's an important voice to have this year. So thank you, Ruth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wendy. And Denis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ruth. My name is Denis Mockler, and I've been with the HRB Clinical Trials Network PPI group since 2016. And I suppose I come from a background where I have mental health illness, and I was interested in mental health advocacy for a good while. And so it was suggested to me to join PPI, that I might be able to contribute something. And I've been involved with a couple of different research projects, a good few over the years. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I think it's great. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Denis, and you're very welcome. We're delighted to have you with us. And just on my screen, I'm no particular order, but Mandy, you're right beside Denis there. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ruth. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mandy Daly, and I'm a parent of a preterm infant and also the founder of the Irish Neonatal Health Alliance. I've been active in this area since 2006, in particular in the area of research and development and also advocacy. And in that time, I participated as a collaborator and co-applicant in over 50 research studies, both here in Ireland and internationally. I'm a HRB reviewer. I work with the National Office for Research Ethics, and I'm also a reviewer for the BMJ, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Thanks, Mandy. Gosh, we have so much to learn from you. Thanks so much for being here. And Caoimhe, you're very welcome, Caoimhe.
Thank you. So I'm Caoimhe, and I kind of only got involved with PPI kind of during COVID, because it had kind of been an interest of mine, but I kind of didn't really have the time. But during COVID, with college being online, it kind of gave me that bit more freedom to kind of do lectures in my own time rather than having to be set to a certain time. And I've been involved with ICAN for a few years previous, and I'm also on the youth panel with them.
Brilliant, Caoimhe. You're very welcome, and thanks for joining us. And Anne.
Hi, Ruth. Sorry, the host needs to start my video. That's why you can't see my face.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anne Lawlor, and with the strange sounding name of 22Q Ireland. So I got involved in PPI through my work with our parent organisation, but primarily like other parents here, because I had a child who was diagnosed with 22q deletion syndrome when she was 15, and the information at the time was very sparse, and so it's quite a long story, which I won't go into. But I'm delighted to be here, Ruth, and to be taking part in the conversation.
Thanks, Anne, and I can confirm that your video is on and we can all
Great.
so thanks for that. It's lovely to have you, Anne. You're very welcome. And last but not least, Marian, you're very welcome. Can you hear us okay, Marian? You're on mute.
I have the same problem with my video. It doesn't allow me to start at the moment.
Okay, we'll get that sorted for you, Marian, but we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Now, in 2001, my son Brian was hale and hearty. He was studying for his Leaving Cert and playing soccer. And just 4 months later, Brian died of leukemia. So I found my experience of palliative care really difficult. I found it lonely and frightening. And at times I thought I doubted my sanity, because you were plastering this big smile on your face when you were going in to see him. And in fact, your heart was breaking. So afterwards I said, like, what can I do to help others in my situation? So I wrote our story in a book called Goodbye, My Son. And also I have a website where people can contact me. And that really is the same thought that I bring when I come to do any PPI, is like, what can I do to help? Whether it's dealing with researchers or whatever group that I'm dealing with, I suppose I'm bringing the same thing with it, that I have some experience and what can I bring to help? So thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Marian, and you're very welcome. And I can confirm your video is on now and we can see you. You're looking lovely there. Okay, so we're just going to start off, I suppose, by inviting panel members, whoever wants to respond, to this issue. And it comes up so many times, you know, what were the motivations for getting involved in PPI? So like how you got involved, why you got involved. We've heard a little bit of the why there, maybe for some of you as you were introducing yourselves, but the motivations for getting involved in PPI. Would anyone like to respond to that question? Yeah, Mandy, you've got your hand up. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks, Ruth. Well, my own was obviously a personal journey that led me into this area. My daughter had been born preterm. I have a healthcare background, and my experience was such that I was able to identify some of the gaps that existed in the area of neonatology that I wouldn't have been aware of working at the other side of the fence. And I could actually see that there was very little cohesion and collaboration amongst the various stakeholders within the field, and that they needed an independent platform to work together and make change and affect change. And I guess that's what motivated me. And obviously the personal reason for wanting to ensure that, you know, the outcome for my child was better than it was in 2006, and ensuring that for families going forward, that the experience for them will be a bit different, and that if we all work together, perhaps we would actually get to those goals a lot faster than we've been doing up to that point in time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. And Marian, I'm just wondering, you mentioned your son there, you know, when you were speaking a couple of minutes ago. So obviously you had a similar experience in terms of a personal motivation. And I'm wondering, you know, was there any other reason then why that motivated you to get involved? So you had the personal journey and that kind of story as well, but anything else?
Well, what also helped me was the fact that when I published the book, Posey contacted me to suggest that I might take their course in patient education. So doing the patient education course, I realized that perhaps, you know, I had more to offer in terms of patient input than I first anticipated, and that our opinions are very important on many aspects. Things that influence me, for instance, are language, the kind of language that people use when they're dealing with sick people. Like earlier, we had people speaking about, for example, that, you know, Black people don't trust the system, but they're not the only group. There are other groups as well. And still we keep asking questions of people like, what is your ethnicity, when we want to pull a tooth or something, which really doesn't make any difference to the job in hand. And this is where perhaps PPI kind of comes into, that I can see where it is that as a patient, I can explain that perhaps this question isn't necessary every time you go to do something, because it's very off-putting for people who don't trust the system anyway, if they somehow have to state that, you know, they're a certain ethnicity or a certain something or other, they may feel that they will be treated differently. So there are many ways that I found outside of the actual palliative care aspect that I can contribute something in general. You know, like PPI values were something that I was involved with Michael Foley, for instance, where he did research on PPI values, and I was one of the people involved in that. And again, that was an excellent experience where a lot of us gave our values, and we had very good feedback on that occasion to show that, you know, what we had to say was very well listened to, and that it did contribute towards the understanding of what PPI values are.
Excellent. That's really good experiences. And can I just ask you, because you mentioned there IPOSI, Marian, and I'm aware that there might be some people listening that don't know what IPOSI is. Could you just give a very brief explanation from your own experience?
Well, the title stands for the Irish Platform for Patient Organisations, Science and Industry. And it's a patient-led organisation where, from our point of view, we study clinical trials, we study lots of various things relating to our experience as patients, so that when we go to, for instance, to discuss a clinical trial or any of those things, that we actually can understand what's going on. So we learn a lot of background
on
the data that we need, so that we can actually contribute and understand what's going on. Because if we didn't understand what was going on, obviously we would contribute less. So there's quite an intensive year course where we study with the various contributors to us in Trinity and otherwise to add value to our experience as patients. So we have the technical background and the knowledge that allows us to be better contributors.
Great. Thanks so much for explaining that. And actually, one of the things that struck me when I was listening to you there, Marian, about your motivations for getting involved, you said, we are very important. Denis, I'm wondering if that resonates with you, this idea of, you know, getting involved in PPI contribution because we are very important.
Yeah, I do resonate with that, because like I was thinking about my reasons for coming into PPI, and originally my first really involvement was mental health advocacy back in 2004 or 5, around that time. And you know, I was very keen to see the mental health services change and evolve, like, you know, and getting into the PPI group in 2016. I got into it because it was suggested to me that it might be a good idea, and I just wanted to feel useful and to feel that I was contributing something, and it looked like something that I could do.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the level of commitment, or, like, you know, I could miss meetings or with my health and that. I didn't have the level of commitment required, but I didn't actually miss that many meetings. But yeah, just that feeling that of being useful and of being heard and being involved. And like we were involved in different projects over the years, and researchers came back to us and said how really important what we had done, you know, our involvement was. And you know, I've seen our work like being used in the field in with GPs and that. So definitely,
that's really important. And it kind of goes back to what Marian was saying there earlier about, you know, the feedback and seeing that what you're actually working on in your group is being used. So that's really important. And I can see you've got your hand up there.
Hi, Ruth. Yes, thanks. I primarily got involved, I think, because I wanted to affect change. Anya was diagnosed when she was 15, and her care before diagnosis was chaotic. It was still chaotic after diagnosis. And Avril spoke earlier about the immense responsibility that some patient organisation feel. And I can say that was certainly the case for me, because I started with 3 families. I have about 200 now, families all around the country. And it is an immense responsibility. You know, these are people, children, families with real lives and real issues and real problems. And one of the you know, you have points along the journey that you can recall with really great clarity. And one of those for me was discovering that there was oodles, and I had to go outside the country to do this. number one. Because there was absolutely nothing here, and there was no mechanism here whereby I could say to anybody, you know, can you help me with this? And certainly no research. No one ever asked me along the way to take part in research. Not in Ireland. I was asked from outside the country. I think this is common with rare diseases, that we had to go outside the country to find supports and information and accurate research and all of that. But discovering that there was upwards of 3,000 research papers on the condition that my daughter had, that was mind blowing to me, because where was the practical translation into her care? And it's a very complex care, it's a complex needs condition, like a lot of conditions. So I wanted to change how her care and the care of all the other families, and then that broadened out into not just Anya's condition, because there are so many rare conditions, Ruth. There are absolutely oodles of them, and they're all complex care. So, so that was, and it still remains a motivation to change how things are. And the other thing about, you know, that really has struck me is that not all research is about clinical research. You know, when we have the issues, we invariably have the solutions.
Wow.
And it's a lot of it is around care that goes beyond medical needs. And that's not, I don't think it's given as much focus or attention that it could and should have.
And that's a really good point.
Sorry.
How do you drive that change?
How do you drive it? Oh my goodness, Wendy. I had to, well, you see, I think because I lived, because it was 2015 really when we had a real turning point, because what we did as an organization was commission a mental health researcher for ourselves. And we started to do the research that mattered to us. You know, and when I thought about it, and this is why I put the question in the box earlier about neurodiverse children, like, I mean, I felt, I don't know about you as a parent, but when I meet other parents that are affected by the same life issues as me, I instantly recognize that, and they recognize me. You know, it's a huge relief to meet someone where you don't have to explain your child, you don't have to explain the challenges and all of that. You just instantly recognize each other. So I thought about it must be the same for our children. So initially our mental health researcher, Lorna Karen, she might be on the here today, and I asked her just to pull together a literary review, because there was no Irish literature on 22q. So I asked her to pull together the international thing, and I thought it was going to be a one-off kind of, and that was it, because it was going to present it. We were going to present it as a business case to the HSE, but she's still with us. Do you know, everybody talks, relationships are so important, Wendy.
Well, Anne, how did you commission her? How did you find her? How did you get her on board?
How did I find? Oh, yeah. Gosh, do you know what? That's such a long story, Wendy.
Yeah, you better put it a bit short.
I'll put it as short as I can. I went to the launch of a mental health report, nothing to do with 22q. And Lorna was the person who had been tasked with doing this report. And I went up to her afterwards and simply asked her, would she start working with us? And we don't get any funding as an organization. None of us are paid. So we're very judicious about where we spend our money. But I have to say that was the turning point for us. And Lorna continued to work for us and do small pieces of research, and we gradually built the case. So I suppose in terms of PPI, we've come in to it kind of through the back door, if you like, or in a very different way. But all the time, laser sharp focus on what the families needed.
Yeah. And as I listen to you there, I can hear so many similarities across everybody that's spoken, you know, so far in terms of kind of the personal journey. You know, Mandy talked at the start there about gaps identified. You talked about wanting to affect change. Denis spoke, you know, there about being important, but what's also important is that flexibility around involvement or not at different times, depending on your own health and your own life and everything. And Caoimhe, I'm conscious we haven't heard from you, and I'd love to bring you in. And I'm just wondering, Caoimhe, is there anything for you? Because you mentioned when you were talking about it was easier to get involved, you know, when lectures went online, for example, and you had a little bit more time. So I'm wondering, are there challenges, Caoimhe, for staying involved in PPI work?
I think this year especially, I was kind of in my final year of college, so kind of when we were fully back on campus this year, so it was that bit harder because I was kind of trying to juggle lectures with assignments and then doing a thesis as well, that it was kind of that bit harder to find the time and also to put like the right amount of energy into it, into the two things. So I kind of had to take a bit of a step back, but now that I have more time, I probably will put myself forward again.
Great, great. And do you feel you're growing in confidence, Caoimhe? Like at the start, was it a little bit daunting, or how did you feel?
Yeah, I think at the start it was quite daunting because I took part in the IPOSI course as well there last year during COVID, and I was kind of the youngest on it. And I think that I was kind of like, oh God, like, am I doing the right thing by doing it? But as it went on, like the people that I met through that were amazing, like, and they were so friendly and like always trying to involve me in it. So I think that kind of really helped, and it kind of really helped with my confidence.
Great.
And actually, Ruth, Anne brought up a really good point, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And for us that have, so I've seen both sides of it. I wasn't working as a carer for the last couple of years, so I had more time to get involved. I'm now working full time, so unfortunately I've less time. So I really have to pick and choose what I put my time into. But what Anne said, which really helped me on the start of my journey, was networking. Pushing myself outside the rheumatology box. You never know who you'll meet, what the connection is, and how you can link into them a couple of years later. So I know everybody on this talk probably has met people through that way. And as PPI contributors, it is hard to find the time to do that. And Mandy, do you find that you have to pick and choose a little bit now where you give your time?
I do, Wendy, and it's becoming much more difficult because I do this job full time, but I do it on a purely voluntary basis. And every day, actually, as a PPI, I'm now working full time. And because I have pushed myself outside the field of neonatology into pediatrics and into adult acute medicine, my PPI skills, they're transferable, which is actually wonderful. And it's a really good point to always bear in mind that they are transferable across lots of disciplines. But that comes with its challenges, and that you do end up having to prioritize and always reflecting on what your purpose is. And I often do that because I ask myself, why did I get into this area and what were my ultimate goals? So I do need to keep focused on those when I am prioritizing. So you do have to look at the offers on the table and understand where you are from a personal level and from a professional level and what you can devote. Because for me, I need to devote all of my attention and I need it to be effective. If I can't do that for a project, because of some of those challenges, I will then have to sort of make my excuses and decline that offer. But because of the networking that you've mentioned, it's always easy for me then to go, but I do know somebody else who might be useful. And I think that networking is so valuable for us as PPI contributors, but also for the research industry, because we can help them secure somebody else who comes recommended by us. And I mean, you and I, Wendy, have met through this. And, I've met Lawlor, I've met Caoimhe through the IPOSI, I've met Marian through the IPOSI. So that network is constantly increasing. And I think the PPI contributor landscape is actually getting a lot better, and it is becoming much easier to network. There are more people there. And I think by always remembering who and where you came from, but then offering the solution also, that if you can't participate, you know somebody who probably would be very useful for that project.
Excellent. And actually, when you think about it, that was the message, wasn't it, that was coming across from the very first talk this morning, where Avril was saying, go to the website, look and see the charities that are there, just make a phone call, knock on the door. People are willing to have conversations, and you can progress. And then, as we heard in the subsequent conversations, build relationships over time. So, you know, it sounds like that your networking, from your experience, Mandy, has really progressed over the years, and you probably have now quite an extensive network of people that you can link with and call on and suggest, as you said yourself there, if you're not able to contribute at that point in time yourself. Yeah. I'm just wondering if, Denis, if you'd have any advice for other PPI contributors or members of the public who want to get involved in PPI. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, like for people who might be interested in getting involved, I suppose I'm kind of drawing a blank just for the moment.
No, that's okay.
Just you can get involved at whatever level you want to be involved with.
Yeah.
And I've seen places where you can come to Zoom meetings, or you can come to in-person meetings, or you can contribute by email or by phone.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure what else to say, really.
No, but that's really important, Denis, because you were bringing up the point there about flexibility, you know, in terms of how you get involved and the level of involvement and how that might change over time. You know, at some point in time, you might be more involved. As Mandy just said, she's working full time at this voluntarily. But at another time, maybe if, you know, you have other demands on your time, you mightn't be as involved. So the flexibility, I think, that you suggest there is really important. And actually,
sorry, yeah, go on.
I was going to say that resonates with what Caoimhe was saying earlier on as well. Yeah.
I think a lot of public and patient people don't know about PPI. It's not well known. I talk to people about it all the time, and people don't know what it is, and they don't know what it's about. And definitely when I started with PPI, I didn't understand it. But I knew I had something to contribute. I knew it could be useful. I've got good feedback from the researchers. But sometimes in the PPI, I would feel a lot out of my depth. But because of the language of researchers and because of the research projects involved in that, but other times then I feel more engaged. So, you know, sometimes you do feel out of your depth a bit, but I think I would suggest, you know, hang in there and ask questions. You know.
Yeah.
And Denis, I think that leads nicely on to our next question, which is what are the challenges of staying involved? And I'd love, Denis, that's a really good point. And I felt the very same way when I started. First, I felt out of my depth. I felt the language was a language I didn't use every day. And yeah, I found that a huge challenge at the start, without a doubt. Marian, what have your challenges been?
Well, slightly differently to you, as you know, I kind of started after doing the IPOSI course. So that was a great help to me to have the language before I started. But talking about where Mandy discussed earlier, transferable skills, we also have transferable skills from our real life, from our other jobs and whatever. And for example, I trained with NALA, the National Adult Literacy Association, in my previous job, how to communicate in simple English with our customers. So that was useful to me. And in an example of where language matters, because I saw a question coming up there on it, like I was involved in a research project that involves, in the future, people, when somebody dies a year later, you will get this questionnaire in the post, the purpose of which is to discover what your experience of palliative care was in 3 different locations. So the questions will be down sort of 3 times for you: at home, in the hospital, and in the hospice. Now that's a lot of questions. And the original set of questions that came out were asking, when your loved one was 3 months before your loved one died, and a list of this, and every single question had, you know, your loved one died, and then a week before your loved one died, and a month before your loved one died, and all this. So it was a very distressing thing to read. But when we put together our suggestions on changing the language, this came back completely differently. They really listened very well. And it came back then saying that instead of talking about your loved one, they would mention their name. So in my case, they would say, you know, we're very sorry Brian died, and in the last 3 months of his life, in the last week of his life. And of course, I want to talk about the last week of his life, but I don't want to spend my time talking about the week before my loved one died. So, like, from the purpose of even getting a result, apart from the upset factor, that the researcher is going to get a much better result by having the language that people would like to hear. And I totally want to talk about the week before he died and his experience and what would have been better or worse or this or that. But this whole loved one died was totally different. So language is terribly important. And that particular group also had went through in microscopic detail the covering letter that would go out to people asking them to fill this out. And again, if they didn't answer the first time, they were going to send a reminder, and they went through 3 different reminders. And I have to say that that microscopic detail that they went into about the language in them is going to give them a much, much better result. So again, when you're talking about why am I doing it, I really felt that, I contributed something. I definitely saw the little bits I contributed were included, and I saw where other people had good ideas, they were also included. And I do think the end result for the people who actually want the job done is going to be an awful lot better, because an awful lot more people are going to answer it now than would have answered the original one, because certainly language makes a huge difference. And if you want to get research done, language makes an awful lot of difference.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Marian. And in the chat, I see a lot of people are really excited about that this discussion has come up about language. And I'm going to get you to start, and you're definitely the right person to start with when we talk about reimbursement and being the only person in the room not getting paid.
Yeah, well, we're all different, I suppose, Wendy, and we're in different positions. And I made the conscious decision, and I have to say at great personal cost, because I knew there was no payment in this, and I've been doing this for a long time now. But the need to change things overcame that for me. That's just for me and I think a lot of people will volunteer their time, and they may have paid employment and they don't mind, doing it for nothing. But I definitely think there has to be a space now for maybe people like myself who want to be full-time involved in PPI, that we do get paid, because I think we are, and I heard myself described as this not so long ago, and I kind of went, whoa, patient leaders, leadership. And we are leaders because we're leading a movement together, I think, that is badly needed. And I would hope to see it happen. It's that sense of for me often too, it's that sense of powerlessness. And that's not just to do with the financial aspect of it. It took me a long time, like yourself, to get confident in what you're saying and what you believe in. But I do 100% believe in it now. And I do think we are equal partners, even if other people don't see us that way. So I have to maintain that kind of that mindset to do what I do. And it's not for the faint-hearted. It is not for the faint-hearted. You have to be strong and in your convictions around what you're doing, and the rightness of it, the justice of it. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And Mandy, I know you have done a lot of work in this area, and it's something that you and I have spoke about at great length. And it's always the first thing you say when you come onto a project. It's always the thing I last say. We're like polar opposites. So I love the fact that, like, I've changed so much since I've met you. So yeah, share what you've been through and how you've changed.
Thanks, Wendy. Well, I guess because I'm here since 2006, it's been quite a journey, and I have learned along the way. My confidence certainly has grown. And also there's a piece of work being undertaken at the moment. Myself and Anna Cody and Emma Doris from HRB are working with some UK, Scottish and Welsh individuals with a view to trying to put some structure on this whole compensation conversation that's being had, because I now will always introduce myself as a PPI. And when I'm actually helping, with grant applications or with steering committee contributions, I will ask what the terms of reference are and what the compensation is for the PPI contribution. And people well know me now at this point that I won't say they know any better than not to come to me, but they understand that I put a value on my contribution. I bring a perspective that a lot of other people don't have to a table, and I think that ought to be valued. And it's more than equal. It's really, really important because it drives the direction of so many research studies and steering groups. So the piece of work we're looking at is universities struggle. They don't have mechanisms in place to compensate. A lot of them really do want to recognise the contribution, and sometimes it's done in the form of vouchers. It's not always acceptable, as Anna said. If this is a job, it needs to be recognised as such. So we're hoping to work with revenue, with the university structures to try and find that mechanism that will ultimately be put in place. The role of the PPI will be quantified and defined properly. And I think once we get to that point, then we can start, I guess, we won't have to start fighting our corner as much as we do at present. And I think that's really important. And that's actually a big preventative from people getting involved in PPI. The time commitment is enormous. And as you stay within that area, you gain in competence, you gain in a skill set, which becomes more demanding from other areas outside your own, discipline. And you've got to actually stand up for yourself and put a value on yourself. And it is difficult, I understand it. A lot of us don't have the confidence to do that. But unless we as a group adopt that approach, we're never going to be recognized as equals, because there are always going to be people who want to do it for free, which is absolutely fine. But I think we really do need to understand that everything a PPI brings to a table is valued and needs to be valued adequately and equitably, or as those around the table. And it's often due to just the lack of mechanisms and structures. And I think we are getting there. It is probably going to be a little bit longer than we'd like, but the conversations are happening, and they're happening with the individuals who at a higher level who can actually make that decision going forward. So I'm quite hopeful. As I said, I'm around since 2006, and it definitely has gotten better, but it's gotten better because of the conversations that I've initiated. And I think when people realize that PPIs aren't, they're not there from a tokenistic perspective, and they do have a really impactful influence on an outcome, I think that's where the change happens. But I think we need to do it together. And I think the fact that the piece of work that's happening currently is a multi-stakeholder piece of work, I am quite confident that it will happen. So, I say watch the space, but maybe not quite in the immediate future, but it is happening, which I'm very pleased about.
Thank you, Mandy. Caoimhe, I'm really interested in the fact that you've done the IPOSI course, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm wondering, before you started the IPOSI course, you were thinking more about rheumatology and lupus and rare diseases. And now, since you've done the IPOSI course, how has that changed? Are you thinking about dipping your toes in other areas? Or, what do you think is the future for Caoimhe in the next couple of years in PPI?
I think it's definitely given me a better kind of outlook on the various aspects of PPI, and kind of take me away from just focusing on rheumatology. That it's kind of given me that broader insight into the interests of other involvements. So I think definitely I'll try to kind of get involved more in other areas, not just kind of stick to rheumatology. I think that's something that I'll definitely take up.
And you find it that the landscape is easy to navigate, that you know who to kind of network to, or what you should be involved in, or do you think that's all a little bit hazy still and you're not too sure who fits in who?
No, I think at the start it was kind of a bit hazy, but I think now, kind of after doing the IPOSI course, that we kind of have a good network set up, and we get a lot of emails kind of about PPI research and about different kind of webinars and all. So that kind of really helps, because at least we're getting the information, so it's there, and if you want to take part, you can.
Yeah, exactly. IPOSI are absolutely fantastic. Yeah, they've guided us all along our way. Ruth, I'll hand to you.
Yeah, Denis, I just noticed you had your hand up there and you took it down again, but was there something that you wanted to add, Denis, to any of those conversations?
No, I was just thinking there when Wendy was talking, it's great that we're talking about getting payment and, getting paid in money, as opposed to vouchers. And I think when Marian was talking, I was thinking, it is a movement. PPI is a movement. It's something very important. that PPI happens with research, that there is involvement and equality and diversity and all that, because I don't think people realise how important it is and how useful it is. I've had researchers come back to our group saying they were just amazed with how it affected their work, So,
And Denis, do you think the awareness about PPI is growing? Like, let's say, even from the time that you started in PPI, would you see a change in people's awareness of PPI and what it is and how to involve PPI contributors in research?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's growing. Yeah, definitely. The conference is probably growing as well. I think this conference is getting bigger. I think it's growing. And I think PPI people are becoming more vocal and more confident as well. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, it's great. And it's lovely to see so many people at the conference this morning. And I was really encouraged listening to Mandy, because that issue around reimbursement is something that researchers and PPI contributors would love to see a solution to. And I think your ideas about working together, working collaboratively with the systems and the structures, that's the way to go. So I actually was really inspired listening to you talk about it there. And I'm aware that Anne had her hand up while you were speaking on that issue of reimbursement. So Anne, if you had something you wanted to add?
No, not really, Ruth. I had my hand up and then I realised it was up and I should have taken it back down.
That's okay. Can I ask you a different question then?
Of course you can.
Can I ask you what, from your experience, and I know you've so much experience, but from your experience, have you any top tips or advice for researchers who have never been involved in PPI before, but would like to get involved and would like to get PPI contributors involved as partners in projects?
I think perhaps, Ruth, there's and it's missed because it's not really, maybe it's not really seen as that important, but there's a whole, and it's all around conversation and relationships.
Right.
A foundation piece of just lots and lots and lots of conversations, asking, like I said earlier, no one ever asked me what mattered to me,
okay,
and my family, those kind of questions, because I think when you get researchers and public and patient involvement doing it from the get-go, you get a win-win situation then, and you also open the avenue to, someone mentioned it earlier there in the chat, into longitudinal research, if that's where you're going. There's all types of different research, but and it depends, but certainly, the relationship is the big thing. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. That's really important. And that idea of relationship and relationship building over time,
yes,
is almost like a theme that's come up across the presentation.
Yeah, and also building on the research route. I think there's a lot of I'm not a researcher, but I think there's a lot of research waste. Have clear vision and goal about what is this research for. Who is it for? Is it for me and my publication? Is it just to add, but what is it for? Does it add real and meaningful value?
Yeah.
And is it actually helping those that it's purporting to help?
Yeah, and they're questions you need to ask together, aren't they?
Yes.
The researchers and the PPI contributors as part of the research team ask those questions together. Figure it out together. And create that space, as you said, where you can have those conversations, and multiple conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
Marian, I'm wondering if that resonates with you, this idea of trying to avoid research waste and, trying to make sure that it's more targeted.
Absolutely. And this is where it would be nice to see that the research, like for instance, that I did where it discussed the values of PPI, can that be published in a place that everybody else can find it? Can we, share what has been done? Because all kinds of bits of research are being done all over the place. And then it's being redone by another set of people and another group of people. And the other point I wanted to make really is, which is kind of vaguely mentioned, but to put it into actual words, is from the very beginning.
Yes.
Because it's not much use when they have decided what it is they're doing and you come in, but really it isn't exactly what should have been done in the first place. And most of the time, that is what happened. And like, for example, I signed up just a couple of days ago to talk about reimbursement to something that is by the HSE, and it's relating to palliative care. And it informs you, first of all, there will be no reimbursement, which I think was kind of quite an insulting sentence to see down in anything, because you know everybody around the table will be paid except yourself. But I just felt there mightn't be that, there don't seem to be that many PPIs with the palliative care experience, so I threw my name in the hat. But again, like, this is set out what they want to do. So I'm wondering, but I'll do my best to see what contribution can I make, because I had no involvement in anything so far. So I don't know what it is. They're like, it's about policy, but like, where will they be going from there? So I'll have to see. Maybe it will surprise me, because I mean, I was surprised in the other one as well, because it sounded so daunting when I started it. I may be very surprised and find it's the most useful thing I ever did. But starting off by knowing what their agenda is and knowing they won't pay you, they're not two useful things to start with. We need to say that the agenda is a bit fluid and that they can adjust it.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, ideally, like even the
Marian, I find that so frustrating to hear. Oh my God, like, so frustrating. It's like 10 steps forward and then 20 back. Yeah, like my blood is boiling now listening to that, and I can see Mandy and who are going to hit the roof in a second. To read that is, but like you said, Marian, you go into it then, and you do try and drive change to the best of your ability, but God, you get exhausted by driving change.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Wendy, you use the word exhausted. It's an exhausting process.
Yeah.
You know, and you can get research fatigue as well, you know, because you are trying so hard to really affect change. I think that's what we want, is to affect change. But when you run up against these and sometimes it's very patriarchal, you know, we're doing this and you, that's it.
I think it is important to say, though, that there's been great progress made in Ireland, and, like, for example, research funding bodies like the HRB really welcome and expect, you know, the budget allocation to include PPI contributors, you know, and contribution and all of the rest. So, like, I think that there's been great strides made in that. I mean, I know we're not there, and I know there's lots of work to do, but progress has been made, I think. And it's about getting that message across, isn't it, to the people who are applying for that funding. Like, I was so interested to hear Jenny this morning say, really, you're talking about 6 to 8 months before you put in the funding application that you need to be working with your PPI contributors. And there is no budget at that point in time, you know, before you actually put in the application and get hopefully successful funding. There's nothing in that period where you're doing the planning, you know, but it's so important to have that collaboration and relationship building from the outset. Mandy, you have your hand up there, and I'd like to invite you to come in.
Thanks, Ruth. I just want to go back to some of the tips you asked.
Yeah, sure.
And I have a couple, and I also have some for the PPI contributors. So I guess you asked about researchers who are hoping to get involved in PPI with no background. My one piece of advice in that respect would be to try and secure a PPI who is skilled in the area, so that you're both not coming from a very, very low baseline. So there are lots of skilled PPIs out there, and I think reaching out to organisations like the Health Research Charities or for IPOSI, you will find yourself a skilled PPI who can actually upskill your research team in the area of PPI. I think that's really important, because otherwise then you've got to, if you get somebody who's just interested in PPI who hasn't done it, and you've got researchers who haven't done it, you're muddling through very muddy waters, and it's time wasting. The other thing I think from a PPI contributor's perspective is it's really, really important to practice self-care. This area can become really, really bogged down and tiring and exhausting, as Anne mentioned, and to be aware of what your own strengths are and playing to those strengths, but at the same time, knowing those areas where you may not have the skill set and seeking out, you know, additional education, additional training, be that from a personal perspective or actually with your researcher saying, I don't know enough about this area, can you allocate me a buddy within the research team whom I can use as a sounding board if I don't understand stuff, and maybe go and get your good clinical practice, you know, do what you need to do to upskill if you can. Have a clear sense of who you are, what you're about, and don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for clear guidance on what the expectations are of a PPI within a particular research study. Valuing your own opinion, regardless what's been mentioned around the table, is really important, but also really important is measuring the impact from both a PPI perspective and from a researcher working with PPI. So at least you close off the circle and take learning lessons from working together and being able to reflect on how it went for you, how it went for the researchers, and taking some learning nuggets to your next research study. So I guess every day is a school day for me, regardless of my age. And I do practice self-reflection constantly. I always take learnings nuggets from whatever PPI contribution I make. And I think being able to take those forward with me, kind of, it makes me more competent and more confident. And I guess just constantly being able to nurture those relationships once you have them, and using those relationships to network elsewhere. You know, I suppose, as I mentioned, I started within the field of neonatology. I've now gone way beyond that. And it's always through word of mouth, one researcher talking to another, or they've heard me speak somewhere and they may reach out to me. And thankfully now, I think that transferable recognizing is happening. So now researchers know they don't necessarily need a PPI with a skill set within that disease area, that they can use a PPI from another area, because the skills are they're the same regardless what area you're going to work in. And I guess being able to, for us as PPIs, to convey that message and being confident to convey that message to researchers, because they are often frightened to have conversations with us. They're frightened of interacting with patients. They're frightened of using the wrong language. So I guess there's a huge learning curve that still needs to be undertaken, but I think we do need to take it together, and it kind of comes from bottom up and top down.
Yeah, really important tips there, you know, from your experience, Mandy. And two of the things you said really are striking me. So one was around that whole issue of self-care. You know, because obviously people have lots of other demands in their life, from family, maybe from other work, maybe from health conditions. So there's lots of demands. So self-care really struck me. And the other thing you mentioned there, and Caoimhe, I'm going to ask you about this if it's okay, is you mentioned maybe having some sort of a buddy system, you know, when you get involved at the start. So Caoimhe, you said that, you know, initially when you got involved in PPI, it was a little bit daunting, and you know, you got into the IPOSI course and that helped. But I'm wondering, do you think a buddy system, like a PPI even buddy system, would be good, Caoimhe, at the start for PPI contributors who are thinking of getting involved?
Yeah, I definitely think it would help a bit, because then, like, even if there was issues around like kind of not understanding the language being used, or kind of not understanding what's going on, that at least you'd have a buddy to be able to go to and say, look, I don't actually understand this. Could you explain it? And it's not making a big deal of it, that it's just someone that you can go to kind of ask those questions that you mightn't want to ask in front of loads of people.
Yeah. So that PPI buddy system could work very well for new people getting involved as well, and who are building confidence over time. Yeah, thanks, Caoimhe. And Denis, I'm wondering, have you any thoughts about that issue around self-care from your experience? You know, I know you've been involved in PPI for many years, so just wondering if there's any ideas there around what's the best way to do that.
Yeah, self-care would be for me. I mean, I probably attend PPI meetings 2 or 3 or 4 times a month. I wouldn't be as regular. I wouldn't be as often attending meetings. Yeah, definitely. My health hasn't been well in recent times, so I had to take a break for a couple of months, you know. But I was able to email, and you know. So I suppose, yeah, it's important to know what level you want to be at and how much you want to do, but the fact is, you can be useful in many different ways, you know.
Yeah. That's a really important point. Yeah, you can be useful in many different ways and involved at different levels at different times.
Yeah. Very good.
Wendy, anything else striking you there?
No, because we're nearly near the end of time, Ruth, aren't we? So I just leave everyone to have a quick last word of maybe just a little reflection on what we talked about today and what you've taken away from it, or just a little piece of nugget of experience you want to just finish off with to everybody that's joined in. So Anne, if you want to start off.
Thanks, Wendy. I think I just, when you do get a gain, if you like, for me, that's what keeps me involved, and I have to say we have had a gain. We now have a skeleton 22Q care pathway, and it's a lifespan one. And I think it's important to celebrate your gains. We're going to be publishing this as actually a research article, about the PPI involvement in from a literary review to co-production. And I think it's important to do that. I think it's wonderful to have these conversations with you and the others, because I think it re-energizes us, and we don't often have that mechanism to do it.
Exactly.
So great
Caoimhe?
conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Caoimhe, do you want to finish off and say anything?
Yeah, I just think, it's nice to have more young people kind of involved. That was kind of my issue, was kind of when I started, I kind of felt like I was the youngest there, and it was kind of daunting. But kind of once you get to know everyone, it's actually not the worst, and everyone's really friendly and stuff. So it does help.
Fantastic. Denis? You're on mute there, Denis. Sorry. Now.
To finish off, is it? Yeah. I don't know. For me personally, I went to college like 20 years ago. I did an arts degree, and I've always loved academic kind of things. And I think because of my health, I wasn't able to be involved at a higher level. So I just love the area of research, and I wish, that research projects would reach practice. That's the thing we talked about a few minutes ago. About the waste that's involved in research. That's something that really interests me and bothers me.
Thank you, Denis. Mandy?
I suppose for me, it's very important to remind ourselves that PPI can make a real impactful difference to people's lives now and in the future, and to never undervalue the perspective that you can bring to a table, and always to sort of remain true to yourself and your own purpose.
Marian?
I would agree with everything that's said there, and talking for myself again about that last one that I interviewed, it's the reason that you feel you can possibly do something that gets you to do it. But if it's very negative, like applying for that, I waited till the last day, the last minute, debating with myself between you're dumb to do something, where you may have little impact, to the fact that maybe it will make a difference. So really making a difference is why we're doing it. And that is the single most important thing. But to make a difference, we need to feel that we are making a difference by getting feedback, and even the minimum reimbursement, even the €40 you get after 6 sessions of an hour and a half, it gives you some sense of being valued. You need to somehow feel you're valued, and that your contribution was useful and valued, and that you yourself are useful and valued. And those things are what will keep us going, I think.
Well, Marian, I have no doubt you're going to make a big difference and a big impact to that project, and I think you will turn it on its head. So to everybody today, thank you so much for joining us. We could keep going for another hour. This is what happened last year again. So to my co-chair, Ruth, it's been a pleasure again to share this with you. I'll leave the last word to you, Ruth.
Well, I suppose just to say, I know I was so engrossed listening to the conversation, it's hard to keep an eye on the chat, but just to say to the panel members, there have been so many complimentary messages there for all of you, thanking you for being so candid and open, thanking you for your advice, thanking you for sharing such diverse experiences. So it's very obvious when you look at those messages that the people who are listening into your conversation really enjoyed it and appreciated it. So thanks so much to all of the panel members for your time, your expertise and your experience.